The Pittsburgh Pirates made a lot of acquisitions in the offseason this year. Will any of them come back for 2025? We're going to discuss on today's second episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. Folks, welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Ethan Smith. That is Gary Morgan, who joins me every single Monday. And as you heard, this is the second episode today. We obviously had a fun crossover with Jeff Carr over at Locked On Reds, kind of discussing why these teams are very similar and why you probably don't want to admit it, but they are very similar teams, just wearing different jerseys. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Make sure you shop all of your plumbing, HVAC, and electrical product needs at supplyhouse.com. Gary, one thing I think is for certain after we leave this Red series, by the way, check out my Reds takeaways that I had on Steel City Pirates. I don't think I'm allowed to go to games anymore because when it gets to a point when Rowdy Tellez is pitching in the ninth inning, I think that's kind of a breaking point on what is now a 3-8 in-season record for the host of Locked On Pirates at this point.
Well, that's up to you to believe in or not, whether whether that's real or not. I think a lot of the time you've been a victim of you show up for bullpen games for some reason.
Yes. Yes. It has happened a lot. And outside of that, Pirates win the series against the Reds. Again, check that series takeaways out, and then we'll also have a preview of the Cubs series on that website as well. We're going to preview it here, and we're also going to talk about why a winning record season is still very, very possible, and it's actually pretty easy math to figure out why. But before we get into all of that, a fun topic of conversation that I've had with myself, not on this show, over the last week is kind of looking at the guys that Ben Cherington brought in during the offseason last year and looking at these guys under the microscope of saying, could they be here next year? Now, I ran a poll on it. Obviously, most of that poll went about how I expected. It was mostly Rowdy Tellez and Arlis Chapman. We'll get into them in a minute. I think you can go ahead and kind of chalk up some of these guys as just absolute no's. Like Yasmani Grandal, I would highly doubt is back next year unless they really believe that he needs to be Paul Skeen's primary catcher. I just don't see why they would keep him there for that reason, but you never know. Michael A. Taylor, who I planned about talking about on this show today, yes, he could still be back, but he was placed on waivers yesterday. Don't think he would be back next year either. Do you have any other thoughts on that? I don't know if we're going to really have any disagreement on those two.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, and outside of that, I mean, you have some of the smaller guys that have obviously left, like Martin Perez, Marco Gonzalez. I mean, I would imagine that he would not be back next year at all. So really, you get through that conversation, but then where it gets interesting is when you start talking about Rowdy Tellez and Arlis Chapman. And Rowdy Tellez is the one I wanted to start with first, because a lot of people have a mixed bag on Rowdy. You know, he's been in like kind of an electric guy over the last couple months, had the terrible start to the year, has since kind of come out of it. But when you look at it from the overall sample size, Gary, I think we're still pretty disappointed in what Rowdy has brought to this team as a whole. But when you also look at what's going to be available as far as free agency is concerned in 2025, and, you know, maybe what could be available in trades, kind of becomes an interesting conversation on if you do bring Rowdy Tellez back next year. What are your thoughts?
I mean, my initial thoughts are most people tend to think this isn't a big deal because Endy will just play there. And I keep trying to remind people that Endy hasn't faced major league hitting or pitching in a year and probably won't start even swinging right-handed until like right before spring. It definitely won't be like into a throwing program before like at least midwinter. And I don't see him stepping back in behind the plate, and I don't necessarily see him manning first base a whole heck of a lot. especially if he can't be the right-handed part of a platoon, then all of a sudden I have some big questions. Rowdy Tellez would be a security blanket signing for me. It would basically be like, this is as low as we want this bar to go at first base. Let's bring him back and hope that we can do something better. But I don't know. 10 home runs is certainly not what they were looking for out of him. He doesn't run like a guy that can get away with hitting 10 home runs. He's fielded the position relatively well. You could do worse than Rowdy Tellez. I fear if they don't just sign Rowdy Tellez, they will do worse than Rowdy Tellez.
Yeah, and also something that you touched on with Endy as well is I've seen that too, where people kind of just throw him at first base and that's where he's going to be. And you mentioned that he hasn't faced MLB pitching up to that point in over a year. Folks, let's also remind ourselves that he wasn't exactly all that great when he was facing MLB pitching either. It's not like he was doing crazy things when he was here.
I mean, Heath, I just had somebody yesterday bring up to me, like, with Henry coming up, I said, well, it's good to get some eyes on Henry, help clear up this catching position a little bit, going into the offseason. We know Bart's going to come in as the starter, so be it. Well, they go, well, who stays when Endy's back too? Well, don't worry about that yet. Like, you don't know that Endy's going to be here. You don't. It's not like he's locked into being a major league player. Like, just keep your pants on and let some of this stuff answer itself. Quit trying to answer it for them. Let it happen.
I think I remember us having that conversation around last season whenever we were talking about that. And you said the exact same thing. You're like, let's let it work itself out first. And I think I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. I think re-signing Rowdy, he's going to come at a cheap option. Again, I would say probably around what they paid him this season, if not lower or maybe a little bit higher. He gives you security at the position. You already kind of know what you're getting with him. And let's say Endy does work out at that position. If that's where they end up putting him, then great. Cool. It works out. If it doesn't, like you said, they could do a ton worse than Rowdy Tellez, especially with what's going to be available in free agency. And then the one that I think is very, very interesting at this point, and I was in the middle of writing a piece about it on your website and our website, I guess, and I stopped because we're recording this. Arlis Chapman is a very interesting case to me because I mentioned to you before I hit record today that Arlis Chapman has not had a month since April where his ERA was higher than a 4, and since June has not had an ERA in a month that was higher than 2.79 and has a 0.60 ERA since the All-Star break. So it's kind of hard.
Out.
Yeah, and it's hard to argue with how the bullpens look that he hasn't been there or has been their best reliever. I mean, he really has. And you look at bringing him back in 2025. Now, there's a lot of layers to this. 1, he's going to be 37 years old. 2, the price tag is probably not going to change because teams will not hesitate to sign Arlis Chapman to $10.5 million. I think that's pretty clear. And on top of that also, I mean, you kind of brought him in this offseason to fill that need where you wanted one more setup guy. And I'm not saying that they don't have guys in the system and on the team right now that couldn't take care of that position if he does leave. But it's kind of hard to justify not bringing him back at this point, in my opinion.
It's hard for me to go all the way there because Arlis Chapman is a mercenary at this point.
Yeah.
So he's going to go where he gets the biggest paycheck, has a chance at a championship, according to him. I think they overpaid for him this year to get the deal done quickly and not necessarily let that ride out and let him test the market fully.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that they'd get him for the same price. I think he had a better season this year than he did the year before. That is a lot of money, but there'll be other suitors. The Pirates need a left-handed reliever. You might as well get somebody that just excelled for you. So if there's any interest from him in staying, yeah, I would love to see them pursue that. I think it would probably be the smartest move they could make. It suits two needs. That's why, every time something like that comes up and you start feeling like it's just too perfect to fit, you get antsy because you don't know that they're going to pull it off.
Yeah.
He's a good player. There's going to be other teams involved. If they get him, it's because he wanted it and they wanted it. We haven't seen them succeed in that scenario very often.
Yeah, i.e. Carlos Santana. But also the whole Arlis Chapman thing, I think, as well, is if you do bring him back in 2025, you can almost have the same conversation that we had this year when he was signed. And the initial reaction was they could be a contending team and still move on from him. Now, it didn't work out that way because of injuries and among many other things. But who's to say you don't sign him again next year? He comes in and you could move him if you want to. That is a very, to me, at least, a very possible thing that you do, and you still achieve the goal that you initially had anyways, which is probably to at least get something in return for what he's doing.
I look at it this way, like you're heading into an off season and you don't have a priority of needing to go out and buy free agent starting pitching.
For the first time in a very long time.
They might do it anyway. I personally think they should. I think they should go out and fortify it and get somebody, even if it's somebody that ultimately doesn't make it. But I think they need to definitely go out and do something like that. But you have room to spend it in the bullpen. So spend it in the bullpen. And I think this is one of those years where we shouldn't just excuse deciding not to get Arlis Chapman because he costs a lot. We just saw them do it. They just proved they would. I can't imagine that the price is going to go up a whole heck of a lot. Just do it. I think we got the fruit this year. You're tasting the wine already. You might as well try it again.
Yeah, again, I think you slot him right into that same spot he's been in this year. And it's really, to me, a low risk, high reward, kind of what you got this season. I mean, he's had a very good year. He's been your most consistent reliever since June. He's been a very strong option out there. And at the end of the day, if he comes back and does the exact same thing next year, I think you walk away happy with it. And I think a lot of people are going to walk away happy from this season with it at this current moment right now. And I don't see how you don't. But, Gary, Arlis Chapman has also kind of been a part of a reason why I think that there's a real chance that this team can still have a winning record when everything is all said and done. We're going to discuss that here on the Locked On Pirates podcast in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Shop Supply House for all of your plumbing, HVAC, and electrical product needs at supplyhouse.com because you can get supplies from the site that is made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Pros in skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining supplyhouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. So head to supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. And don't forget, folks, when you tune in on YouTube, check out the Locked On MLB podcast as your second listen of the day after Locked On Pirates, because Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is covering everything going on in the world of baseball as the postseason approaches. So please go check that out. Gary, you know me as a math guy. I love my math. I love statistics. I love StatCast. I love all that stuff. I was talking to somebody this morning actually, before this show, and they said, can the Pirates still get a winning record season? I said, mathematically, of course they can. It then took me to go to the MLB app and look at the remaining series they have through the end of this week and September. If the Pittsburgh Pirates were to win 2 games in every single series they have remaining, they would finish the season 82-80. A lot easier said than done. Let's just say that. But then you look at the opponents, and you have Chicago, Cleveland, Chicago. Then you have Washington, Miami, Kansas City, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, and New York. And folks, if you've been listening to this show all season, what's the one thing me and Gary stopped doing this year? We stopped predicting series because of the fact that when you look at all of those series, you can make a real case that the Pirates can win every single series they have left this year. Now, will they? Probably not. But if you listened to our show last week, Gary, what did you say about having a winning record at the end of this year?
It matters to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think like when you have a young team, and this is a young team, whether you want to admit that or not, it is a young team, and it is a team that we are going to watch continue to grow together for the next few years. Every step that you take towards becoming a winning franchise is important. Every single one of them. I remember being in the stands next to people holding up a sign when the Pirates won their 82nd game, years ago. And it was the first time in, I think, like 40 years that they had done so, or 30 years at least. It felt like it was forever. And it felt huge. I'm not saying we're at that point yet. It hasn't been that long since we've had a winning season, but it's been long enough that, like, don't you want to see them take that step? Don't you want to challenge them to?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a few weeks ago we were pretending they were in the playoff picture, right? So now we're going to say that we don't think they can win 2/3 of their games the rest of the way?
Yep.
Well, I think we should hold them to that. We should hold them to that's our expectation. Get a winning season put together. Make that, if I'm this GM, I make it a condition of this coach keeping his job.
Yep. And I think the verbiage of how you would suggest the record they need to get to that number changes the idea of how people think about it for some reason. Like if I go up to somebody and I say the Pirates need to win 20 of their last 32 games to get a winning season, they're like, no way. But then if you just say the record, it sounds a lot more attainable at 20-12. You're telling me you just have to be 8 games over 500 over the last 32 games you play with, mind you, 7 of those games coming against Washington and Miami. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the verbiage of it changes a lot because, yes, it does sound a lot scarier when you say they have to win 20 of 32 games. But 20-12 is something, folks, that we've seen them already do this year. We've seen them be at that point already in stretches of over 32 games. This is not like jumping in the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland and you're starting to see stuff that's all different. Like this is a team that can do this very easily, I would add, I think. And especially with what we're going to talk about probably with Jared Jones returning soon, your starting pitching staff is going to be fortified again. And the offense has lately not really been that much of an issue outside of the strikeouts. If they strike out a crap ton, but if they start hitting the ball, they've actually been quite good lately. And that's really how I think about it, Gary. I think I share that same feeling with you that I almost feel like the coaching staff themselves should be hammering this to them every single day. Let's get to that point.
I don't know if they're going to make it. I don't know if it's possible. I don't need to. I just know I need them to be looking like they're trying to do it.
Yeah.
I want them to play the game as though that's their goal. That's all. Whatever that looks like, whatever that involves, whoever that entails being called up, whoever that is part of the scene, cool. You know, we just took a major hit here, right? Joey Bart, been one of the better hitters. He's out now for a couple weeks. You know, Henry Davis replacing him. Okay. I mean, like, how much of a drop off is that going to be?
Yeah.
Maybe does Henry like kind of just come up here and shock everybody and start roping home runs? And then all of a sudden, like, things just look a lot different. Oh my God, there's a new dynamic here in the lineup. Things are different. Then they maybe pull up Cook or York and see how that moves and what that improves. Gonzalez comes back. All of a sudden, this lineup starts looking fleshed out. I could see it, man. That's all I'm saying, and I hope the team does too. I don't want to see them finish anywhere near what they had last year. I want an improvement on last year.
Yeah. And I think my feeling on it is if they were to finish below 500, it wouldn't shock me. And if they were to finish above 500, it also would not shock me. Because like you even said, Gary, before that 10-game losing streak, we were talking about this team being a wild card team. I mean, people were talking about how the hell a team is going to beat Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, and Mitch Keller in a 3-game wild card series. These were real things that we were talking about a month ago. And now, like you said earlier, it almost feels like people just suddenly forgot that team is the same team you're watching now, just after a very unfortunate case of events. And
I mean, to be fair, the team forgot. The team let us forget.
Yeah.
I mean, they went through a stretch that you shouldn't go through with the level of talent that they have. Inexcusable to lose 10 straight in that situation. They did. That's on them. That's on somebody. Somebody will pay that price. I don't care right now. You know, the mission went sideways. That doesn't mean you don't regroup and go and try to accomplish the mission. Get a winning season done. That's all. That's what I want to see them fight through, man.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we'll continue to see them fight through, and that mission continues, Gary, with the Chicago Cubs, who the Pirates have had an interesting season with so far. And we're going to preview that series a little bit here on the Locked On Pirates podcast to end today's show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com right now because you've heard us talk about FanDuel all the time, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And folks, also don't forget as well, you can also bet on baseball still, like I did yesterday, betting the Pittsburgh Pirates with their first 5-inning result. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Ellie De La Cruz, Spencer Steer, and O'Neill Cruz all to get a hit. All you got to do is go to FanDuel and do it. And just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook today. And folks, don't forget that you can listen to Pirates games on the road on the SiriusXM app. Just look up Pirates and you can find it on the radio when you're on the go. I mean, hey, guess what? It's already almost the end of August, which means in about 2 months' time, Christmas decorations will start popping up at Walmart, and you're gonna have to start being on the road.
2
Obviously,
months. I got somebody telling my wife it's supposed to be 2 months from now instead of next week.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, the pumpkin spice lattes are already coming out, Gary. You know, it got a little cold last week, and everybody was like, "Uh-oh, here we go. Football starts this weekend. Here we go." All right. Anyways. The Pittsburgh Pirates will, of course, be playing the Chicago Cubs over the next 3 games, and I previewed this series on Steel City Pirates. And my first inclination that I had immediately is this is a series that the Pirates should absolutely win, and there's no reason why they should lose. I mean, and I'm just going to go ahead and outright say it. It's because of the pitching. The Pirates, of course, will have Keller and Skeens in this series. I think we're expecting Jared Jones to go Tuesday. I don't know what that expectation is.
Charrington said It would be. So
Tuesday. So you're going to have Keller, Jared Jones, and Paul Skeets. Hopefully, I don't know how much we get out of Jones on Tuesday. We'll talk about that in a minute. On the Cubs side, you're facing Jameson Taillon, Justin Steele, and Kyle Hendricks. If that doesn't spew, you should win this series because of your pitching. I don't know what will, because you're avoiding Javier Assad, who's given them problems this year. You're avoiding Shoto Imanaga, who's given them problems this year. And at the end of the day, you have a chance to really cement yourself in this division. Something I also wrote about on our site yesterday, that the Pirates have the second best record in the division right now against divisional opponents. So why not improve that against Chicago this week?
Yeah, I don't think there's any division opponent that I get scared to play. I still feel that way, even after the terrible, stretch that they went through. I still kind of feel like every single one of them, the Pirates should have a good shot in, including Milwaukee.
Yeah.
I know that doesn't sound right, and I know that their record looks way better, and it is. They've been an unreal team, but they don't scare you when you play them. They're just really, really good, and they cinch up all the holes that other teams let go. All those fundamental problems we watch the Pirates make, the Milwaukee Brewers don't make them.
Yep.
So I think that kind of is the big difference in this division. They're way more advanced as far as like not screwing up. I still don't understand how the Cardinals are 500. I'm certainly not afraid to play them.
No.
I don't know, man. I love the schedule at the end here. I think everything that we talk about is doable. I'm not one of those guys who thinks the playoffs are there, but I want them to pretend they are, and that's all I want to see. And when we face the Cubs in particular, I want them to stop letting the Cubs do Cubs things to them. Stop letting them hang around in games they have no business being in. Take advantage of a Kyle Hendricks starting or whatever. Beat the crap out of those guys. Those are Taillon's been really struggling. Don't let him come in and spin curveballs all game. Spit on them and wait for the fastball. Make him do it. That's all. Justin Steele has been hittable. Hit him.
And this is a team that can hit lefties, mind you, as well. So, I mean, it's not like Justin Steele should be like this unbeatable force on Tuesday night that they can't beat at all. And again,
used to be, but Brian Hayes was one of those big lefty hitters. Even when he stunk, he was hitting over 300 against them. Bart is gone. They've taken some hits in that. Connor Joe has not been the same player. So there's a lot, and McCutcheon's not in the lineup. There's an awful lot of that. We're good at hitting lefty stuff that I think has probably died on the vine of injury and or ineffectiveness here recently. So I don't know that I can feel the same way I did when we were facing lefties 2 months ago.
Yeah. And I think going into this series too, and the big takeaway that I had when I was writing about all this and kind of looking at it is, yes, the pitching it should be the story here. I think Keller's coming off of a very good start. Skeens is coming off a very good start. Jones, you kind of hope that he comes in and just gives you enough, I think, is the expectation. I mean, he hasn't pitched in over a month and a half at the MLB level at this point, and you kind of hope that he just has a decent enough outing. And the offense, I think, is really the story because, as you mentioned, Taillon and Hendricks are guys that they should obliterate. These are guys that have not been good this year. These are guys that, I mean, Kyle Hendricks has been horrible. I mean, when he had I think it was a 6.67 ERA, I was like,
it's hard to believe he's still there.
Yeah. I'm like, how do you even justify this? Like, I don't know. I don't know how you justify
respect for a guy that's been around a long time, I guess. I don't know. All I know is like that's not somebody I throw out there as a starter and hope to win.
No.
I mean, we're pitching Jake Woodford. So, I'm throwing rocks at a glass house here, but just saying.
Yeah, I think I had enough of watching Jake Woodford pitch in person, and I think we kind of already outlined this, but what would your keys to victory over these next 3 games be? I mean, is it really kind of what we've already said?
basically hit the starting pitchers. Don't make it interesting. Don't let them hang around in games and get into the bullpen with a close game. Like, take advantage of where you have an advantage. Pirates have an advantage in the starting pitching. I would hope each and every one of those starters this series exits the game with a good lead. That's it.
Yeah, and I can agree. I think that's the big sticking point. This bullpen, even talking about it earlier with Chapman, has still kind of been up and down. It's been better over the last week, but it's still been an up and down unit. And giving those guys a big lead when they have to come in, when Keller, Skeens, and Jones exit, I think is paramount. I think that is a major thing. And I'll also add this too. I don't think the Cubs bullpen's all that good either. So
it's not, but they can put together a patchwork to win a game if they're up 3 or 4 runs. They have enough.
Yeah.
If you ask them to hold a tie or hold like a slim lead, they won't do it. Like the Cubs have a bad record because the Cubs are a bad team and they're poorly constructed. And, I won't go as far as to say poorly coached because they have the greatest baseball coach ever that costs more money than anybody else, right? So he must be super awesome. But I look at the talent on his team and I wonder what the hell happened.
Yeah. Because he did a lot more with a lot less in a different place, I would argue. A lot more with a lot less.
100% emoji, my friend.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to end this show before we start going on a Craig Counsell tirade. Thank you guys for tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast, the second show today here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every day. My name is Ethan Smith. Follow my social down there at MVP_Ethan and at Locked On Pirates. You can find me and Gary's writing work at Steel City Pirates. He'll have 5 Thoughts at 5 later today. There's a ton of stuff going on there today, so please go and check it out. Gary, any special guests this week for the Pirates fan forum, or is it just going to be you and Mr. Stam again?
I haven't figured it out yet. We're at the point of the week where I still have irons in the fire, and I'm not ready to say yet.
Well, there you go. Well, make sure you guys find that at 5 o'clock on Thursday live on YouTube where you found this. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday. We'll be back tomorrow talking about Jared Jones coming back to the starting pitching rotation, talking about tonight's game and so much more. Until then, see you on the flip side.